The next topic within philosophy of religion that we need to address is the question of rational belief. We've looked at arguments for God's existence. We've looked at an argument against God's existence. None of them have been definitive. So the question is it rational to believe in God, despite the lack of evidence? So let's talk about beliefs for just a moment. We all use the word belief, believe, very freely. But I suspect very few people have really considered what that means, how we gain our beliefs. So a belief, simply put, is agreeing that a proposition is true. So somebody says the earth is round. They believe that to be true, so that's a belief. I say Santa Claus exists. Well, if you agree, you have a belief in Santa Claus. So we take a proposition, the earth is round, Santa Claus exists, Mount Everest is tall. If you think that proposition is true, you believe it. We gained certain beliefs as children. We had experiences and we formed beliefs. But if you consider back to when you were a child, many of the beliefs you had have changed. When you are very young, you believe your parents can do no wrong. When you are very young, you may have believed in Santa Claus. But as we grow older, we have experiences, we gain new information. And as that information is gathered, when it conflicts with a current belief, a decision has to be made. Decision you may not even be aware that's being made, but either the current belief has to be discarded and changed, or the new information has to be rejected. So we're children, we believe Santa Claus is real. And let's face it, as a child, we're given decent evidence that Santa Claus is real. Mom and Dad tell us that Santa Claus exists. He's looking over us. He sees us when we're sleeping. He sees when we're awake. We make a list for things to ask Santa Claus for Christmas. We go to the mall and we sit on Santa's lap. And then Christmas morning, lo and behold, we have presents from Santa Claus. We have evidence that Santa Claus exists. As a result, we have a belief that Santa Claus exists. But then Mom and Dad sit you down that fateful day and they have the talk. Santa's not real. It may not have happened like that for everybody. Some people figure it out because of older cousins or older siblings that tell them. Maybe they hear it from somebody on the bus. My nephew was 11 years old when his parents finally sat down to tell him that Santa Claus wasn't real, and they chose for me to be in the room with them. And his response was, "Yeah, I know." And they said, "Well, how'd you figure it out?" And he looked at them and said, "Applied science." So, different people come to the realization in different ways, but the bottom line is we've gained new information, and we have to reconcile our beliefs with conflicting information, and that means rejecting the belief or rejecting the information. So how does all of this bring us around to rational belief in God? Well, in the late 19th century, a gentleman by the name of William Clifford offered what we call evidentialist objection. Evidentialism is the idea that it is only rational to believe those propositions that there is good evidence to believe. Clifford tells a story about a ship owner who was about to send one of his ships with immigrants to the Americas. And the ship is old and sort of decrepit, and there's reason to believe the ship will not successfully make the voyage. But the ship owner doesn't want to spend the money to repair the ship, doesn't want to delay the trip, and he sort of talks himself into the fact that the ship is okay. It's not that he believed it was a bad ship and he sent it on its way. He talks himself into the belief that the ship is in good order and can successfully make the Atlantic crossing. Clifford explains that out in the ocean, the ship does not succeed, it sinks, and everybody on board dies. Clifford believes that making that decision, coming to that belief when he did not have good evidence for it, makes the ship owner wrong, morally wrong. When you believe something without good evidence, you are doing something wrong, Clifford says. And then he likens that to the belief in God. Because he says there is not good reason to believe in God. We do not have sufficient evidence for the existence of God. Our arguments fail, or at least our arguments don't clearly succeed. Our sensory information certainly can't give us God's existence. Nobody's ever laid eyes on God. Nobody's ever shook the man's hand. So we don't have direct sensory perception of God. We don't have good arguments for God's existence. As a result, Clifford says, we do not have good evidence to believe in God. And thus, the evidentialist says we ought not to believe in God. A belief in God is unjustified. So what we're going to talk about next is whether we can have a justified belief in God, a rational belief, in the face of lack of evidence. Does that make sense?